Hey, hey, hey. Happy Saturday. I'm live. How's everybody doing? Happy Friday. If you're at home, what's up? So tonight I am actually going to be talking about Black poverty. And in comparison, I'm going to be looking at Black poverty, but also talking about Black men. And really, why is it that you see stats? And I'm going to show a video and show some articles as per usual. But why is it that there's this challenge when it comes to Black men having upward mobility? Like if you're starting out in poverty, Black men we see have a real challenge. But then also, if they start out pretty well, there's a downward mobility that tends to happen. So we're going to talk about it. I don't really have answers. I don't know exactly what is the answer. I have some ideas and thoughts that I will share. But yeah, so let's get into the conversation. And hello, E. Dunlap. Thank you for the message, E. Dunlap. I got it. I had no idea, so thank you for sharing with me. And JMJ, welcome in. How are you? Hey, hey, hey. And Edward, what is up, Edward? How are you? Let me send a quick note and say that I am live. I don't have an image to share, which is kind of weird. I thought I had the image in here, and I guess I created it on my Mac, and I don't have it. Wait, hold on. Wait a minute. No, I don't have it. That's so weird. Maybe I created it a while back because I knew I was going to talk about this. I knew I was going to talk about this for a minute. So, all right. So I want to share just a couple of findings that I saw with the articles. And hey, King of Kill. Yes, another great subject. E. Dunlap says, because America doesn't want either of us to have sugar honey iced tea. Well, you know what I'm finding? It's interesting because, and I will show you. What I'm seeing is that for Black women, we actually compare relatively closely with white women when it comes to if we start out poor in poverty, right? And our upward mobility rates, we can, find that we can get economically better. However, when you think about the Black family, and I kept the inheritance in the title because it's like, okay, how do we kind of start out better? Well, we have to start having Black families provide an inheritance for their kids so they can start out better. But if a Black woman's marrying a Black man and a Black man has this downward mobility, well, how does that affect the Black family, right? So it's a 2-for-1 there. So it can't just be one-sided. It can't be, okay, well, a Black single woman can have this upward mobility and have a slightly better chance. But what about the Black men? So, and then how do we kind of get out of this cycle where we're finding if a Black man starts out, or boy, you would say a Black boy. So we're talking about kids here. They start out in poverty. How is it that they pretty much stay generally, I'm generalizing, right, in poverty, but then also someone in a family that's making $140,000, they get in poverty? How does that happen? So I'm going to start things off with a video that basically highlights a lot of points that I'm going to get into because there are multiple studies. Brookings.edu, if you go to the site that I actually linked in the About section, they have, the title is The Inheritance of Black Poverty. And they say it's all about the men. So they focus specifically on Black men, but also compared to white men, white women, Black women, all of that. And then there's other studies like NCCP.org also did a study on looking at, kids and why is it, starting out in poverty, there's such an impact on the Black boy. And then also Birmingham Watch did articles. There's The Economist. It just goes on and on and on. These different articles And we know that receiving an inheritance helps white families more than black families. And there's articles that talk about that as well. But if the black family stays in poverty, well, how do you leave an inheritance? So it's definitely a struggle. Let me find this video and see if I can share it with you guys. You'll have to bear with me because the audio. I always have a fun time sharing audio. So we're gonna see if this works because I thought this was interesting. Now this video is from 3 years ago, but still relatively, still relevant to today. So let me see. Share audio. Make sure I have my volume up. Okay. Can you see my screen right now? Am I showing the screen on your end? Like, do you see the video? Let me see here. Yes, thank you so much, Ethan Lap. You guys are saying hello, hello. Yes, please do hit the like button and share the live. Yesterday, I got I think 5 or 6 thumbs down. So please do hit that like button as you come in. Mic check 1, 2. You're funny. Check 1, 2. Testing. Okay, so okay, cool. JMJ, thank you for letting me know that you see the video. So let's see if the audio will play. And hello, Mr. 100 Rounds. Hey. All right, so let's play this video because I think it's very insightful. And that will kind of lead me into the points that I have that were highlights for me based on the articles. So let's get into it and let me know if you can hear.
Research finds class matters a lot less in America when it comes to economic mobility for black males. Income inequality is often cited as an important factor in holding people back. But a new analysis suggests black boys and black men face economic disadvantages even if they start off from a similar point of income and wealth as their white counterparts. Yamiche El-Sindor is back with our conversation.
So I wanted you guys to make sure you caught that. They're having a hard time economically, even if they, start out better. They're still having a hard time. Okay, cool. You guys can hear it. Perfect. Lovely. And hello, Vibes with Chola.
A new study released this week underscores just how big a gap African American males face when it comes to moving up the economic ladder. Some of the findings are dramatic. White boys who grow up in rich households are likely to remain that way. Black boys who are also raised at the top are more likely to become poor instead of staying wealthy in their own adult households. Black boys fare worse than white boys in 99% of America, even when children grow up next to each other with parents who earn similar incomes. Raj Chetty of Stanford University is one of the co-authors of this study. He joins me now. Thank you so much, Raj, for being here. This report seems to indicate that black men will fare worse than white men, even if they are raised in households with similar incomes. Can you explain what's happening there?
Yeah, so one of the most striking findings of the study to us was that even if you take black and white boys raised in families at exactly the same income level, even at high income levels, you see that black boys end up with very different outcomes on average relative to white men. They're less likely to complete high school, they're less likely to go to college, they have significantly lower earnings in adulthood. And that phenomenon, interestingly, applies really only to black men. When we look at black versus white women, you see much more similarity in their outcomes.
So I want to highlight that. It is a specific focus on black men because it's not the same case when it comes to, black women. All right.
If they grow up in families of similar income. So it's something unique to what's happening to black men in America that I think is really a concern for generations going forward in terms of perpetuating inequality by race.
And that inequality, it's really striking to me. One of the things that this study reports is that African American men who grow up in households with two parents that are earning $140,000, they fare about the same as a white young man who is raised by a single mother making just $60,000. How can that be true? Because it feels so counterintuitive. And what does that mean for African American families and their futures?
Yeah, what you're getting at really is the finding that there's a great deal of downward mobility in Black families. So you would have thought intuitively, that's what we expected going in, is when you get to a certain income level, maybe racial disparities disappear, that at some point kind of escape the poverty trap. But that really doesn't seem to be the case, even once your parents reach a high income level.
I just caught that he said you kind of breach that poverty trap. I think that's what he said, poverty trap. And it does definitely seem like it is and I'm sure there's different factors that are in play, of course, but just to hear these numbers that, if you start at the bottom, it's hard for you to get to the top. You start out kind of more at the middle or to the top, you find your way back at the bottom. So that's astounding, really.
Well, it continues to be the case that Black men have higher odds of essentially ending up in the bottom of the income distribution than staying at the top of the income distribution. And that's why you get this pattern that Black men's outcomes look comparable to white men growing up in relatively low or middle income families.
You mentioned in the study that there are unique obstacles that Black men face. Are we, just to be clear, are we talking about racism and racial bias, or what are those unique obstacles that Black men in particular face?
Yeah, so to try to get at that, we look at how this varies across different parts of the country. So look neighborhood by neighborhood and ask, are there some neighborhoods in America where you see small Black-white gaps, or perhaps Black men doing better than white men? And surprisingly, you find essentially no such areas in 99% of neighborhoods in America.
So did you guys hear that? Looking neighborhood by neighborhood across the United States, you essentially find zero. There's really not a space where Black men are actually doing better than their counterparts here in the United States, which, again, like we talked about this yesterday, typically the studies compare white and Black because, in this country, due to the history, that's always been that comparison, right? White and Black people. So that is what they're comparing it to.
You see better outcomes for white men than Black men. Now, digging in deeper, you can ask, where do we see relatively good outcomes for Black men? And there are a couple of factors that pop out from that analysis. One, you see that areas with larger rates of father presence in homes among Black men, you have better outcomes for Black boys there. So if there are more two-parent families, particularly among African-American households, you see better outcomes for Black boys. And second, you see that areas with lower levels of racial bias among whites tend to have better outcomes for Black men. So those are a couple of the factors that I think could be associated with these better outcomes, but I think more remains to be understood in terms of exactly what's driving these really sharp differences.
Gotcha. And I want to talk about the differences between Black women and Black men. There are some critiques out there, critics of the study.
So I just want to pause for a second because you heard him say that and I saw within the studies, a lot of what they're suggesting, this is what can help, is Black mentorship with young boys, and then also kind of instituting more learnings as far as when it comes to unconscious bias and things like that, and then growing up in certain neighborhoods where, either they can get the mentorship or something. But when I hear mentorship, my mind just goes to, well, Black men need to make sure they're in the family and actually being a mentor to their own son. Like, I don't know if there would be a need for this mentorship as much if the Black men could be a mentor to their own children. And I'm saying, son, it should be sons and daughters, right? But it's a bigger impact on these young boys
Out there that are arguing that Black women who don't have long-term incomes weren't counted in your study. Could you is that accurate? And could you talk a little bit about your findings of Black women and the data that you used?
Yeah, so we include everyone. So the power of the study is that we're able to track, using anonymized data, about 20 million Americans from birth to adulthood, people born in the early 1980s whose incomes we're looking at in their late 30s. And that includes everyone, whether you're working or not, every single person is counted. And so if you're not working, you're assigned an income of 0 and you're counted in the study. And what we show is that even taking that into account, Black women, conditional on growing up in a family that's at the same income level as white women, they end up with very similar outcomes. They have similar levels of earnings, similar wage rates, similar college attendance rates, they work at similar rates. So it's really remarkable how for women, you don't see that much of a Black-white disparity, very starkly different from men. Now, I should emphasize that doesn't mean that women are living in households with the same income levels, because Black women tend to be married to men who are Black, who have lower incomes.
I want to point that out. So we're faring pretty close to white women generally, as he said, and a lot of the articles mention the same thing. And one article did call this out, that Black women who, they're married of Black men, and then that does bring like that household income trends downward, and it's like the long-term faring isn't as good. So it's very interesting.
And they also are married at lower rates. And so if you look at household income, of course, you do see a significant disparity between Black women and white women. But when you look at their own earnings, they look very similar.
And so looking at individual women, like white women, Black women, taking apart, household earnings, so who they choose to marry and start a family with, we're around the same depending on, where we start out. So if we're starting about the same, middle income family, we're faring about the same, relatively as we grow up. And then in the data that I was finding too, Black women or Black girls in poverty, they do have a better upward mobility generally, especially in comparison to Black men. And they also compared white women of poor incomes too. So we fare better when we're trying to get out of poverty as well.
And then I guess I have one quick question, which is, tell me a little bit about the solutions here. You mentioned in the study that mentoring might be a possibility, that there might be some policy changes. What do you have to say about how this could change?
Yeah, so in thinking about the solutions, I think it's very important to remember that you continue to see these disparities even among kids growing up on the same street, going to the same schools, and so on. And so often...
That is crazy. So you can grow up on the same street. It's like, so these boys, they can grow up on the same street and have completely different outcomes later in life.
Solutions people think of are things like, we need to create greater opportunities for Black and white kids to grow up in the same neighborhoods, to attend the same schools, and so forth, to reduce residential or physical segregation in America. And while I think that can be extremely valuable, what this study shows is you need to do more than that. Even among kids growing up in the same area, you need to create the same opportunities for Black men to thrive as you see for white men. That could involve things like mentoring programs, for example, like the My Brother's Keeper program, targeted at low-income men to give them pathways to success. It could involve efforts to try to reduce racial bias. It could involve efforts to try to create more racial integration within schools and within neighborhoods so Black and white kids have similar opportunities.
Thank you so much, Raj, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
So that was really interesting. Let me take this away for a second. That was interesting, right? How many of you guys knew that this was happening? Like, did you know that Black boys had such a high, high issue with, even if they're starting out middle class, having this issue of downward mobility trends? Did you know about this already? And then I'll get into some of my thoughts. Mute my mic. Sorry, guys. Oh, there was an echo. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see it. Parents need to be financially literate so they can teach their children. We can make leaps and bounds in a generation or two. I think that's a part of it. I definitely think that's a part of it. It's like, where do you start? Where do you start? Deflection. Hello, Deflection. Welcome in here. And I by Miami. So sorry, I did not see your comment. I would have definitely muted my mic if I had seen it. So I'm glad you everyone was able to bear with me with the echo. This is definitely one of the layers that impact the results you shared on a few other streams, right? It's like uncovering like what is happening. E. Dunlap said it's important to be financially literate, but it's just right. It's just one building block. Yeah, it's like so many pieces to the puzzle, right? It's crazy. It's like so many. It's like, where do you even start? Because I can imagine if you're, and I do feel like in general in this country, we don't have good financial literacy. But if you think about someone that's starting in a middle class family, they're getting a decent education. I can imagine they're probably learning something by watching their family. So, but yeah, that's definitely a component. But I think the financial education piece, I would say that's across the board. I don't even think that's solely Black families, but I mean, yeah, we definitely need more of it because we're trying to play catch up, and we haven't had a lot of the financial education that generally other groups have. And hey, OG, welcome in. I see your comment, or I see someone saying hello to you. Thank you, OG. Thanks for stopping by. And thank you, Deflection, for hitting the thumbs up. As far as neighborhoods go, it seems like how insurance rates work. The zip code determines destiny. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to research that. Well, yeah, the interesting thing, E. Dunlap, was seeing like, okay, they looked at all of these neighborhoods in the U.S., and still there was no area where Black men are faring better than white men. And even they considered, the comparison made for Black men growing up well off and then ending up at the same level as a white guy that was raised in a lower income family, single mom, kind of situation. Very interesting. Where are Zero, Mr. Wise, and Real Brother Ring? Right. Yeah, I'm talking about them. Like, they need to be in here. King of Kill is here, though. Very interesting. Yeah, I agree with that. E. Dunlap, if I knew in high school what I know today, I would have made better choices with my money. Neither my parents nor any other adult in my life taught me what to do with my money. It's sad. So you're kind of changing my stance then, King of Kill. So maybe it is about the mentorship, because I guess if I'm thinking about even my own dad, my dad didn't teach me about finance. My mom didn't really teach me about finance. I learned finance by messing up on certain little things and then going to seek out financial advice very early on. So yeah, I guess having the mentor could help, but then what does the mentor teach you? If it needs to come from Black men, well, are they going to be teaching the right thing to the young boys? We don't know. So, but I think it starts with the family. I think it starts with, like, when I hear mentor, I'm like, well, why do they need a mentor if they have a dad in the home? So we get into like the thinking about marriage rates and, who's raising the kids, who's being a mentor to these young boys. These things have been discussed in Black male spaces. Have they? It's interesting because if they're talking about it in Black male spaces, why is it still happening? Has anything changed? That's very interesting. Unpopular opinion, I wouldn't count so much on integration anymore in America. With the information age, we can learn in between World Star and Love and Hip Hop balance. Lord. That just needs to be canceled. We just need to cancel. It's not good for the culture. It's not good for the culture. My goodness, no, never knew that. You never knew Vibes with Chola. Okay, well, now we're finding these things out, right? We're learning. And I don't think enough. I think you have to seek out this information. It's not like we really talk about it as much as from what I can tell. This is much deeper than culture. Boys are very analytical and direct. In our neighborhoods, they see the dope boys get girls and they want that too. Well, that's one perspective. But when you look at people raised, he's saying raised on the same block in middle income America. So they're not seeing, or they shouldn't be seeing, any dope boys in middle income suburban America. Like, I remember my childhood. I wasn't around. Like, I for the most part grew up, and I actually lived with my grandmother, who wasn't in the same economic status, but so I lived with her for 2 years. But I don't recall seeing any dope boys in the area or anything that I could have like really gotten into at that age. And, so I think there's more there, but I do get the cultural thing of like, what are we teaching the boys? Like, if they don't have the mentor, if they don't have the dad telling them like, this is what you need to do, well, then they're aspiring to these other influences, which aren't great either. I heard of these findings either last year or early this year. I'm not surprised. The fact that information is not being sought or passed down is sad. It is. It definitely is. I Buy Miami. We cheer on gang culture in TV, movies, music. They have fast money and influences a lot. I think women are able to multitask and are encouraged from young to be self-sufficient. If you're referring to Black girls, yes. I would not say Black girls across the board are all taught to be self-efficient. But I do think in Black communities, we are definitely taught to be self-efficient because who else is taking care of us? I mean, we can see this just with the double standards we see in the culture with if someone's shot by someone, whether it's police or whoever, and I watch this stuff and I see some of the comments that go on. There's definitely double standard when it comes to Black women. It's like Black women can protect themselves. Oh, we need to protect our Black men. It's like, what? No other culture does that. I've not seen any other culture have imagery where their women and even their little girls are in front of their men protecting them. Like it's gotta be the strangest. It's like, am I in the Twilight Zone? Like, what is this? So in what world is it okay for someone's daughter to protect a grown man? So that's kind of off on the tangent, but it's definitely taught in our community. You're a Black girl, you need to figure it out. Now, I had an interesting dynamic where my mom did teach me that, but then I also have my dad, who, I mean, he did not teach that. He did not teach, you need to go figure it out. You need to be tough. You need to, I was his little girl and I still am in many ways. So I'm kind of lucky that I did have, him saying things like, hey, my pretty girl. And, I come to get, my snack money and my this and yeah, he basically like typical daddy daughter, like mom said, no, I'm going to ask my dad. So, but it's interesting, the differences. I Buy Miami says that is called redlining, a lot spoken on early. Yeah, higher interest rate based on zip codes. Yeah. But again, we're seeing across area like from what I heard him say, there is really not an area where Black men can go and they're faring better. So I'm going to pull this back up. I'm going to mute myself.
Among Black men, you have better outcomes for Black boys there. So if there are more two-parent families, particularly among African-American households, you see better outcomes for Black boys. And second, you see that areas with lower levels of racial bias among whites tend to have better outcomes for Black men. So those are a couple of the factors that I think could be associated with these better outcomes, but I think more remains to be understood in terms of exactly what's driving these really sharp differences. Pattern that Black men's outcomes look comparable to white men growing up in relatively low or middle income families.
You mentioned in the study that there are unique obstacles that
Expected going in.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the part where he's talking about like they're in the same areas, right? Give it 1 second.
Is when you get to a certain income level, maybe racial disparities disappear, that at some point kind of escape the poverty trap. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Even once your parents reach a high income level, it continues to be the case that Black men have higher odds of essentially ending up in the bottom of the income distribution than staying at the top of the income distribution. And that's why you get this pattern that Black men's outcomes look comparable to white men growing up in relatively low or middle income families.
You mentioned.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a lot. Let me look at some comments and I'm going to go into some of the points that I had myself. Vibes with Chola says, true. Thank you. Yes, please do hit the like button as you come in. Your recent videos have shown how badly our men have dropped the ball. Okay, so I'm just going to put it out there. That did not come out of my mouth. So Black woman did not say this. Black man said it himself. But no, I think there's a lot of disappointment that women have, because typically we're looking towards the men, and if we're seeing this, it's really saddening, because how do you get the Black families out of poverty if the Black man themselves can't have that upward mobility out of poverty, or they can't stay if they are in, if they're out of poverty, they're relatively, middle class or whatever, higher income, they can't stay there. If we can't stay there, how are we even going to kind of progress from there if they can't stay? And I would say, Black women, now I say this with a grain of salt, because not all Black women solely date and marry Black men, right? There are women like me that are open, right? And but relatively, like, just thinking about in generalities here, Black women are marrying Black men. So if you think about that combined income, and if they're going down, well, what happens to the Black women? Are they going to go down with downward mobility too? Like, what happens then? So it's like, what happens to the family? How do we get from the poverty to actually wealth and passing down an inheritance that's other than poverty, just more poverty? We got to get to a point where we are actually progressing and getting our kids to start off in a good place, and then allowing them to have that progression. Not we get them at a good place and then they go back down. And so if you got that going on, it's like, how do you get anywhere? Thank you, Chola. If men don't protect me, I won't do it for them. Men like that truly want to be the oppressor so bad. So here's my stance on it. I'll be open. I do not think women need to be protecting men. I think that's a bit backwards, because if you look, you guys know I look at things holistically, not just, this is kind of what makes sense, but also in nature. Like in nature, and how things happen naturally, if you look at a physique of a woman and a physique of a man, generally, right? In no world would you say, yes, this smaller physique should definitely protect this big man over here. Yeah, that makes total sense. Oh, and they're not even full age? Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, that not yet grown, smaller physiqued individual definitely needs to protect this fully grown, bigger physique individual. Like, no, where does that happen? No. So I really wish the imagery of these little girls in front of the Black men, or even like with the protests, and like, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. Like, if someone has a different perspective and has some thinking of why that is, let me know. But I just can't, I can't wrap my head around it. I'm just like, where do you ever see this? It's even worse that Black men allow Black women to get in front of them and protect them. Too many baby boys in our community. Yeah. And so again, I think about my dad. even walking down the street, he taught me from very young. He walked on the outside where the street was, right? To make sure that, like, and he explained it to me, like, if there was something, someone came from the street or something, he could protect me. So he always was on the outside. And then I would be, on the inside on the sidewalk or whatever, if we were like walking down the street or something. And then the other thing is a grown woman, right? He would walk with me in New York because my dad was there. He doesn't like New York, and has since moved. But like as soon as I left, he was like, "I'm out. I'm out. I have no reason to be here anymore." But he would even walk with me to the metro, because everyone takes the metro, subway, whatever you want to call it, in New York City. And so, most people don't have a car. He didn't have a car there because it doesn't make sense in Manhattan. So yeah, he would walk with me to the subway, go into the subway with me, watch me until I got onto the train. And then he texting me, "Did you make it home yet?" Because but different mentality. I mean, my dad is older. I don't know if it's I don't know. It's just very different for me thinking about, I don't understand. So I do want to get to the articles. I'm going to read a couple more comments and then move over to some of the things I pulled from articles as well, basically reinforcing a lot of what was said in this video. I buy Miami, Black community is upside down in certain aspects. So a lot of things seem like bizarre world. Men should be the protector, but in social media, we seem to have a lot of issues. Yeah. And it's generalities. That's really the big picture, because with what is being portrayed in the media typically will happen because you're learning that behavior. And so even though there are cases like, my personal experience with my dad, or even men, I've seen men protect women, but then what's also the learning that you're sending to the little girls and to the women. So now you're creating girls and women that think I am supposed to protect myself and others. And I've even seen, I think I've told you on this channel, I've seen this Black man, he's holding the door for me and this woman. This woman's like, "Oh, I got it. And they're very upset at him for just holding the door for them. And I'm like, you guys know me. I'm a girly girl. Yes, please hold my door. Open the door, open car door, all of that. So I'm like, "Oh, thank you," and all of this. So I'm like, yeah, please do hold the door for me. I'm very appreciative of that. But I had heard men say some women don't like them holding doors and doing different, traditional things for women. And I saw it for myself. And I was just like, are you kidding me? This is why some of these men are just like, well, fine, you can get your own door. It's but again, you're teaching this rhetoric of what the Black woman should be. So it's kind of a cycle almost. Hi, Sibana Vlogs. This is my sister across the ocean, because we have the same name. So that is my sis. So if anyone wants to check out Sibana Vlogs, please do check her out. That is my sis. I can't rely on men to protect or provide. If I had to dig out of poverty, I'm better off going along with other Black women, as long as it doesn't include religion. Another unpopular opinion. E. Dunlap, you'll appreciate my Christianity video with that comment. But yes, I get it. A lot of women are saying well, I can just do it by myself. Or on the opposite end of that, well, let me just take out race and just date men that are just men, which I think is a beautiful thing. I think most people I don't think people should consider things like race as much when they're dating, because it's going to happen naturally. Naturally, we already tend to gravitate to people that are similar to us in different ways. So it's probably going to happen naturally. But when you say I'm only going to date this type of person, you really limit yourself. And, who knows what might happen, So it's very interesting. It's very interesting how people don't think of the same way. There are good videos on redlining on YouTube. We give great insight on how and why it was difficult to invest in our communities and others come and gentrify. That's another topic that we've talked about a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. I'm going to have to dig into that more. There's a book that I've seen on YouTube that I will read very soon. Okay, Dunlap, cool. Very difficult to get upward trajectory when young boys are cheered and pushed to sports, music, or streets. We need to encourage more education, knowledge, etc. And there comes that mentorship. So it sounds like from the comments, people are thinking the mentorship is really what we need. Hello, Savage. Welcome in. Hello. Shout out to everyone. Yes. Oh, yes, that is my sister. So please check her out. You're just in here listening? Okay, cool. You'll check out the Christianity. Yeah, because the Christianity video, I do talk deeply on how, in my opinion, in personal experience and what I've seen in others, I don't think Black churches are doing much to help our communities. If anything, they're kind of taking out of the community, and where does the money go? So you'll appreciate that. The money, it's just like, poof, where did it go? Where'd the money go? Black churches, they should be taking care of, the community. No, doesn't go. It goes to the staff is what we found in that video. And there's a lot of other stuff that we found out. So, thank you. You're so sweet. Okay, so I know there are some people that just came in, but we are talking about this. We're kind of referring to this video. So if you want to check it out, feel free. I'll probably play it in a bit, but I am going to share one of the articles that stood out to me when I was just looking, because it started with the articles and then I found the video. So I want to pull out a few facts that I pulled from some different articles. Let me pull up my notes. I have a long page of notes. I'm not going to talk about all of this. But let me see if I can kind of piece together which article is which. So, oh my goodness. I have so many articles up on my computer. Which one to start with? Okay, so first thing I want to highlight this. See if I can find the article over here. So I just want to quickly highlight this. We're not going to go into anything deep on this per se, but I just want to highlight that this whole inheritance thing, we have to figure it out, because that's a big portion of the wealth story, right? Let me see if I have the right thing up here. So receiving inheritance helps white families more than Black families. So there wasn't a study that was done where they were kind of talking about the wealth gap. So I do want to make the fact that we do need to essentially get to a place where we can have some type of inheritance. So at the median, inheritance increases wealth by more than $100,000 for white family, only $4,000 for Black families. And why is that? Well, what kind of wealth are we even able to pass along, right? So we have to get to a place where we're getting this inheritance number up. More than half of white families end up with more wealth than their parents. You hear that? While only 23% of Blacks are able to do the same. Which maybe one of the reasons is because, as we saw, Black boys starting out the nice incomes, they have this downward mobility. How do you grow income if you're tanking? And then I'm laughing, but it's a serious issue. But it's just like, it's like this endless thing. Like, how do you get anywhere? So it's tough. Okay, I'm deleting that. Now, is this the one I want to show? Okay, yes, I did want to start here. Okay. So let me pull this one up. And I won't go through all the articles. I won't go through that. I'm probably going to use my notes a bit more. But I do just want to kind of highlight where I'm pulling things from. So there was one study done by National Center for Children in Poverty. And so they were talking about, like, what is the American dream? Oh, I'm not showing it yet. Okay. So what is the American dream? Right? It's this idea of upward mobility, the idea that individuals and families can escape poverty, right? And disadvantages through hard work and perseverance, right? But how widespread is upward mobility across generations? They look at, like, the parents' influence on children's success. Do children from more affluent families remain at the top of the economic structure? Are poor children able to escape poverty as adults? And then how does race impact income mobility, especially mobility out of poverty? So we talked about before, and we saw in the video, for Black men, it's not the case. For Black women, it is the case, where we do have a little bit of a better chance of getting out of poverty compared to Black men. So you have a lot of different figures in here, and they kind of highlight, what happens if you are growing up poor, if you're white, if you're African American. And there was something I wanted to pull. What was it? Because there was one article that actually compared to Native Americans, because I always, it's really sad, but I don't think about Native Americans often. And it's crazy to think that, like, this is their land, but there was one study that basically showed, let me see if I can find it in my notes here, but basically highlighted that the poverty rates, Native Americans were very low as well. So I thought that was interesting. I may want to cover that in another video. What else did I want to... Okay, so generally with this same study, I don't know where it is within this, but what I pulled was that basically the studies are showing that not only are Black children living in families with lower average incomes than whites, which we know, but Blacks are experiencing less upward mobility in general and more downward mobility than whites in comparison. And so that's really the key to the intergenerational economic mobility. So now let's look at these things about Black men. But that comes from different articles. Let me move this around. I'm like literally just toggling around here. And I see a couple of comments. So let me pause. Let me take a pause and look. Hey, Leotis Brown, how are you? I might have to replay the video because I know some newer folks came in here, so you can get caught up on what we're talking about. This is really helpful to me as a father. Oh, good. I'm glad. Yes, we have to talk about it. The men have to be mentors, and they have to teach kids how to be financially smart. Peace to the chat, everyone. I think people are doing good tonight. How are you? Good point. I blame a lot of it on music. Interesting. Well, Black women listen to a lot of the same music, but Black women don't have the same, quite the same challenge as Black men. We don't collectively use our leisure time learning about wealth and investing. So we are not maximizing our time to develop and maintain wealth to gift to anyone. The evidence is 15 people here. Interesting. We actually have had multiple discussions about finance on this channel. I actually just did one a few days ago. So the people in this chat are pretty interested in finance, but yeah. That's interesting that you made that comment. I haven't seen you here before, but I think generally, again, generalizations, you could make the point that not enough people in this country in general learn about finance. And then when you get into the Black communities, it's even worse. I'm going to replay the video because I know we had some people come in, so I just want to kind of make sure everyone kind of knows what we're talking about here. And I will be sure to mute my mic. To the comment earlier. So I'm going to replay the video just so we're all in the same standing and we kind of know what we're talking about here.
Class matters a lot less in America when it comes to economic mobility for Black males. Income inequality is often cited as an important factor in holding people back. But a new analysis suggests Black boys and Black men face economic disadvantages even if they start off from a similar point of income and wealth as their white counterparts. Yamiche Alcindor is back with our conversation.
A new study released this week underscores just how big a gap African-American males face when it comes to moving up the economic ladder. Some of the findings are dramatic. White boys who grow up in rich households are likely to remain that way. Black boys who are also raised at the top are more likely to become poor instead of staying wealthy in their own adult households. Black boys fare worse.
I'm pausing it for just a second because I saw Savage, the scientist, comment. Many people in the hood bully the computer nerd and praise the kids who know how to fight. Interesting. I would even say, like, this is true Black boys and Black girls. Like, yeah. But, you know, you see that in general. And a lot of like it's kind of the common thing, like the nerdy kid gets bullied. But I definitely think it's even heavily, so in these communities where there's a lot of instability. So it's a lot going on. You have a lot of socioeconomic issues that are happening. You have drug problems. You have all these different things in those communities. And then on top of that, if you're smart or if you, you're making something out of yourself or something. It's kind of like that crabs in a bucket thing mentality. It's like, wait a minute, you're smart. This person can't read, so they're gonna take it out. So it's a lot. It's a lot when it comes to like the education system too, which is why a lot of parents, try to find alternative means for their kids, especially if they're gifted or they are really smart or really, really bright. Okay, I'm going back to the video.
Worse than white boys in 99% of America, even when children grow up next to each other with parents who earn similar incomes. Raj Chetty of Stanford University is one of the co-authors of this study. He joins me now. Thank you so much, Raj, for being here. This report seems to indicate that Black men will fare worse than white men, even if they are raised in households with similar incomes. Can you explain what's happening there?
Yeah, so one of the most striking findings of the study to us was that even if you take Black and white boys raised in families at exactly the same income level, even at high income levels, you see that Black boys end up with very different outcomes on average relative to white men. They're less likely to complete high school, they're less likely to go to college, they have significantly lower earnings in adulthood. And that phenomenon, interestingly, applies really only to Black men. When we look at Black versus white women, you see much more similarity in their outcomes if they grow up in families of similar income. So it's something unique to what's happening to Black men in America that I think is really a concern for generations going forward in terms of perpetuating inequality by race.
And that inequality, it's really striking to me. One of the things that this study reports is that African-American men who will grow up in households with two parents that are earning $140,000, they fare about the same as a white young man who is raised by a single mother making just $60,000. How can that be true? Because it feels so counterintuitive. And what does that mean for African-American families and their futures?
Yeah, what you're getting at really is the finding that there's a great deal of downward mobility in Black families. So you would have thought intuitively, that's what we expected going in, is when you get to a certain income level, maybe racial disparities disappear, that at some point kind of escape the poverty trap. But that really doesn't seem to be the case. Even once your parents reach a high income level, it continues to be the case that Black men have higher odds of essentially ending up in the bottom of the income distribution than staying at the top of the income distribution. And that's why you get this pattern that Black men's outcomes look comparable to white men growing up in relatively low or middle income families.
You mentioned in the study that there are unique obstacles that Black men face. Just to be clear, are we talking about racism and racial bias, or what are those unique obstacles that Black men in particular face?
Yeah, so to try to get at that, we look at how this varies across different parts of the country. So look neighborhood by neighborhood and ask, are there some neighborhoods in America where you see small Black-white gaps, or perhaps Black men doing better than white men? And surprisingly, you find essentially no such areas. In 99% of neighborhoods in America, you see better outcomes for white men than Black men. Now, digging in deeper, you can ask, where do we see relatively good outcomes for Black men? And there are a couple of factors that pop out from that analysis. One, you see that areas with larger rates of father presence in homes among Black men, you have better outcomes for Black boys there. So if they're more two-parent families, particularly among African-American households, you see better outcomes for Black boys. And second, you see that areas with lower levels of racial bias among whites tend to have better outcomes for Black men. So those are a couple of the factors that I think could be associated with these better outcomes, but I think more remains to be understood in terms of exactly what's driving these really sharp differences.
Gotcha. And I want to talk about the differences between Black women and Black men. There are some critiques out there, critics of the study out there, that are arguing that Black women who don't have long-term incomes weren't counted in your study. Is that accurate? And could you talk a little bit about your findings of Black women and the data that you used?
Yeah, so we include everyone. So the power of the study is that we're able to track, using anonymized data, about 20 million Americans from birth to adulthood, people born in the early 1980s whose incomes we're looking at in their late 30s. And that includes everyone, whether you're working or not. Every single person is counted. And so if you're not working, you're assigned an income of 0 and you're counted in the study. And what we show is that even taking that into account, Black women, conditional on growing up in a family that's at the same income level as white women, they end up with very similar outcomes. They have similar levels of earnings, similar wage rates, similar college attendance rates, they work at similar rates. So it's really remarkable how for women, you don't see that much of a Black-white disparity, very starkly different from men. Now, I should emphasize, that doesn't mean that women are living in households with the same income levels, because Black women tend to be married to men who are Black, who have lower incomes, and they also are married at lower rates.
And I just realized I'm muted. So that part right there about the marriage thing really got to me, because it's like, okay, you have these men that are trending downward generally, because they're Black men, doing very well, right? But generally as a group. And so it's like, as a Black woman, well, you're thinking about things like marriage and dating. I don't even know if many Black women even think about that, like the impact. If you're marrying a Black man, I don't know, maybe there needs to be something done to make sure there is some type of mobility, because if the man is having this downward mobility, well, what does that say for the woman now marrying that man and then the offspring of the children? So how do you keep that cycle? Like, of course, that cycle would continue, because as the title of this video, it's more about the men. If even if the woman has this upper mobility, well, how do we bring up, we can't bring up the man. I mean, it's most likely what's going to happen is the whole the full income of that family is going to tend downward, not the opposite direction. I think it would be really hard for it to go in the opposite direction because as we talked about yesterday, Black women, we're paid at a lower rate in comparison to white men. And then also in comparison to white women, it was a 21% downward trend that we were paid less than even white women. So, and we're typically 81%, if you were here yesterday, we're finding that the Black women are the breadwinner in their family. So this gets into the why. Well, if of course the Black women are going to be the breadwinner in the family, if the Black men have this downward mobility, if they're having a challenge getting out of poverty, and then they're also having a challenge staying above the poverty line, of course we're going to have these issues. So that's just my thought there. I wanted to get that out. Because of it was just in my brain. So I'll go back to the video.
And so if you look at household income, of course, you do see a significant disparity between Black women and white women. But when you look at their own earnings, they look very similar.
And then I guess I have one quick question, which is, tell me a little bit about the solutions here. You mentioned in the study that mentoring might be a possibility, that there might be some policy changes. What do you have to say about how this could change?
Yeah, so in thinking about the solutions, I think it's very important to remember that you continue to see these disparities even among kids growing up on the same street, going to the same schools, and so on. And so often solutions people think of are things like we need to create greater opportunities for Black and white kids to grow up in the same neighborhoods, to attend the same schools, and so forth, to reduce residential or physical segregation in America. And while I think that can be extremely valuable, what this study shows is you need to do more than that. Even among kids growing up in the same area, you need to create the same opportunities for Black men to thrive as you see for white men. That could involve things like mentoring programs, for example, like the My Brother's Keeper program, targeted at low-income men to give them pathways to success. It could involve efforts to try to reduce racial bias. It could involve efforts to try to create more racial integration within schools and within neighborhoods so Black and white kids have similar opportunities.
So that was the video that we started with and talking about. And the articles that I have been showing, I'll just kind of pull a few up. They're basically saying the same thing. He basically, quick snapshot of what he said. It almost makes me think, seeing E. Dunlap's comment here, I can only speak for me. Don't marry. Most likely it won't be worth it. But don't stick around if he's a bum either. I mean, again, you guys know I'm pretty open when it comes to dating. So it's like, okay, well, as a Black woman, would I want to marry someone if I know that the chances, like the stats are telling me, you're going to struggle, girl. You're going to struggle. Like, don't do it. Don't do it. Abort. Like, oh my gosh. So seeing the stats are just really hard, and it's harder for women because not only does a woman have to think of herself, obviously every person on this earth, you come into this world yourself and you leave by yourself, but the potential for kids, because anytime, if I'm saying I'm going to marry a man, even if I myself don't want children, there is still a possibility if I'm going to be with a man that there can be kids. We hear it all the time where people are like, oops, we didn't. Actually, for myself, I was not the plan. My mom was older when she had me and apparently still very fertile. So here I am. It can happen. So it's like, you have to consider the big picture for women. I will say, I don't think a lot of girls and women think about that. I think, there's a lot of different things that come into play when people have kids, right? And I don't think people literally think, oh, let me think about the impact of having this child, like bringing this child into the world. I think that's a part of the problem, right? generally in our society in the United States, for sure. I think a lot of people are having children and not really thinking about the impact and what it really means to bring a life into this world. So that's part of it. But yeah, you do have to think about what is the impact of me marrying this man or being with this man and, possibly having kids as well. And then with that offspring, how well are they going to be set up, right? Will they have an inheritance? Will they be set up in the right way that they can really be off to a great start? I don't know. Hey, Ben, welcome in here. All we can do is all we can do, is what Ben is saying. Sivana, thank you. Thank you, sis. Again, this is my sister. For anyone coming in, please do check her out. My sister from across the sea. And then please do hit the like button. Commendable K is saying the number one thing that ruins marriage and relationship is lack of money. Yes, that part. It's one thing to be miserable and stressed. It's another to be miserable and stressed and you're broke. Right? That is so true. Yeah, we do see the trends. We see the stats of that is the number one reason why a lot of the relationships just don't work is because they have money issues. And yeah, on top of that, marriage is already going to be hard. If you talk to a married couple, they're not going to say it was a walk in the park. It was easy every day. Everything was great. We fully love each other every single day, and it's amazing. They say that there's an effort, you have to put a lot of effort into it. So yeah, you throw in these money challenges. Well, you're probably going to get higher divorce rates, and we already have this culture of people not really wanting to stick it out with each other, and kind of the Hollywood mentality of, yeah, you get married for a year, we're divorced, married for 6 months, divorce, married for 4 years, divorce, we're done. So it's very interesting kind of culture. And there's a lot of studies of why women today are not getting or wanting marriage, but there are some women that do. So it's very interesting, all the things you have to consider when you are thinking about that as a Black person in this country, because we're seeing there's differences. It's up to Jessica if she wants. Wait, what are you guys talking about? What am I supposed to be doing? Okay. So I do want to share, let me get back to my notes here, because I'm going to share the article, but then I'm going to reference my notes because it's going to be a lot to kind of go back and forth, and I'm toggling between screens here. So let me see if I can do this. Let me see if this works. Is this the one? Maybe. Let me see. No, I don't think this is it. This was not it, but this is a good highlight. More so talking about inheritance and why that's so important. I want to share, let me just close out of that one. Oh, this is the article I was referencing just now, because it doesn't automatically just pop up. Oh man. Okay, this is what I want to highlight. This is something that stood out to me. Okay, let me see if it actually will work this time and I can pick the right one. Because that's what's wrong. I'm picking the wrong article. I'm like, which one is it? I think it's this one. I think. Okay, let me see if that works. Can you guys see my screen? Can you guys see? Let me know if you can see anything. Hopefully you can. Okay, so the thing I want to point out is what I had highlighted here. Make this a little bit bigger. Black men and women have low family income mobility. Close this out. So They looked at, so in terms of individual earnings, Black women, and of course I know it's titled Black men, but I'm going to talk about Black women because I'm a Black woman. Black women have similar odds of escaping poverty as white women, which is what was discussed in that video. Though both these groups lag behind the upward mobility of white men. So the person that, if you look at the groups, Black men, Black women, white women, white men have the best chance. If they start off in poverty, they have a good chance of not staying at the bottom. So 20%, right? Whereas if you look up here, with white women, they have like 29%, and then Black women 34% that are staying at that bottom portion when they grow up. And then a whopping above 50%, 54% of Black men are staying at the bottom. So it's harder for them to get out of poverty if they start there, significantly more than these other groups. So even if Black women, they have a harder time than white women, slightly, right? It's still not at the rate of Black men. So that's one thing I want to highlight. So what happens, so we're looking at these individuals, right? But what happens when you tie the two together? Like maybe, they get married or they live in the same household, whatever. Well, this is what it looks more like. This is the family income. So what happened? The family income. So, got a partner now. We got a partner. What happened there? You tell me what this story tells you. So the white women, that percentage, this is a percentage of they stay at the bottom. So we're still looking at the same data, but this is the difference. Now, family income, but individually, Black women, Black men. So that number skyrocketed for Black women now. 62% of them are remaining at the bottom because they are in a family now. What happened? They're not just individual anymore, the family. What does that say? What does that tell you? I need to make it a little bigger. Okay, let me see if I can do that. I don't know if, you know what? I can probably do this. I don't know, did that help? So this was just as adults, single people, Black men, 54% of them, if they're in poverty, they're staying in poverty. 22% of white men, they're in poverty when they're young, they stay in poverty. Black women, 34% of them, they start off in poverty as a kid, they're staying in poverty, 34%. 29% of white women. So roughly, what is that? 5% difference there, I think, quick math. And then you look at, okay, what about if they have a family? Why did that skyrocket? Black men, about 50%. So it went down a few percentage points, not by much, but when they have a family, so they started at the bottom, right? Poverty. Are they still in poverty? 50% of them are still as an adult. White men family, 28%. So that went up a bit. I think it was 22% before when they were just the individual. White women went up a bit, 33%, but still around the same. But this skyrocketed. They were at like 34%, sorry. So 34% all the way up to 62% getting in the family. So Black women face a very high risk of being stuck in poverty, 62%, surpassing even the 50% risk faced by Black men. For whites, the odds of remaining stuck in poverty remain relatively low for both men, 28%, and women, 33%, when we use a family income measure, because again, this is looking at once they're in the family. The headline finding here is that among those who grew up poor, Black women are the only group showing a marked difference between the risk of being in the bottom, I don't know how to say that word actually, quintile. I've never said it before, of the individual earnings distribution for each gender, and the risk of being in the bottom quintile of the family income distribution for the whole age cohort. Whites do well on both accounts. Black men do poorly on both accounts. Black women do reasonably well on the first and poorly on the second. So once the Black woman has a family, it goes down. Harder to get out of poverty. This result is probably driven by the fact that Black women tend to create families with Black men who do poorly on both counts and thus bring down the family income results for Black women. Had to bring it back home. Whew. Bring my face up so I can see y'all eyeball to eyeball. Did you guys hear that? Did you guys see that? Did you guys feel that? So what's a Black woman to do? So you look at a stat like that and you're dating, right? Not to bring my personal situation, but I'm going to bring it in here. Yeah, so I'm pretty analytical on some accounts. Like I will look at numbers and say, okay, this is what I need to do. That's like my financial choices. Like when I decided about Bitcoin, any stocks, like I'm like, okay, this was at this price. Okay, turn down. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. I'm doing it. Like whatever, I'm doing it. I'm going to use this percentage of my income. I'm going to put it in there. Okay, cool. So if you're thinking about that, and you know that your chances of being in poverty or staying in poverty or getting back in poverty or whatever are going to increase if you marry or have a family with a Black man, solely because they're having the challenges with their upward mobility or maintaining, their status. I don't know. Let me look at the comments here. Hopefully it was big enough for you to see, Brian. Let me know if you want me to bring it back up because I can't. I tried to make it as big as I could with me still being able to read it. She not messing with no bro. You know what? I mean, why? Like, I can be by myself. Why? Why would a woman say, yeah, I want a man that doesn't make any money so that my kids can start out poor? Yeah, that's a great idea. No, who does this? No, it doesn't happen. Realistically, it shouldn't happen. It does happen. There are women that are looks good, handsome. He doesn't make any money yet, but we're going to make it. Which I think there's a difference between not making money yet and having ambition and working towards something. Because there's many entrepreneurs that are working towards something, but they're working, but if you see people of a certain status and they're not even having the ambition to do something, that's an issue. That's an issue, in my opinion. That's just my thoughts. This is, not talking for all Black women, of course, but that's an issue. Harder to get out of poverty with a family. But did you see the stat about Black women tending? Did I even show that? Let me see if I showed it. So the result probably, now they say probably, because I think we generally know Black women tend to create families with Black men. But then if you look at the studies on Black men, they do poorly on these accounts of getting upward mobility and also maintaining the wealth they have. Like, they grew up in a wealthy family on the same street as some of these white wealthy kids. And then it still went down. Like, how? So you're looking at studies like that. And so they're saying, and I'll bring it back up for just a second. So they're saying, the whites are doing well on both accounts. Like, if they're born into poverty, they got pretty good chances of getting out of poverty. If they have a family, they still have a good chance of, getting out of poverty, right? But then you look at Black women, if you're raised, Black girl, you're raised in poverty, you got a chance. You got a chance, girl. You can get out. You can get out, girl. You can do it. But, big but, if you create a family with a Black man, just be careful, because Black men don't have as great a chance getting out of poverty. Thus, bring down the family income results for Black women. There you go. And then they also looked at marriage rates. It really found that marriage really wasn't a big impact into this, which I thought was interesting, but that could be because of, what does marriage really do for a Black woman if they're marrying into poverty? Right? Because we talked about it yesterday. Still a percentage of women that gain into the elite class solely because of marriage. Like, it's not like they earned enough money to get into that elite over 200,000, 250,000 income. They just married into it. So, now they did say there was a drop in the rates of poverty persistence for Black women, but it was pretty modest, 62% to 56%. So what they were saying, the key to closing the income disparities for both Black and white women is to close intergenerational gaps in income. So there's an article that talked about that, but it was between Black and white men. So closing that gap. And then they also pointed out that married men tend to make more money, that's another, there are low marriage rates in the Black community generally. But I think from some studies I've seen, I don't have it in front of me, I think marriage rates are tending to go down anyway. in the US, I think marriage rates are just, women are saying they're not getting married. And I don't, looking at a study like that, again, Black, thinking about it realistically, are you going to get married? Now, for me, it's different. Like, for me, I'm not solely saying, I only am going to marry a Black man, but I have heard some Black women say that. Older Black women say that. Younger, 20s, early 30s, mid 30s even, I haven't heard it as much. But, older Black women are like, you date what? You should date a good Black man and da 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 da. I can't tell people in my family. Can't really tell that many people. My mom doesn't care. She's like, whatever. But some women are just they're like, no, that's the only, that is the only man you could ever. No, men are men. It doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I don't know why people, and I talk about this on my channel a lot. Why are we so hung up on the race? The only reason we really need to think about the race is when we're talking about cultures, different cultures and learning from different cultures and things like that. When it comes to healthcare, it does. There are some things that are different. African people or African descent tend to not do so well with dairy. So that's we should consider that. And then in terms of this, when we're looking at stats and really figuring out, okay, how do we better a group of people? Otherwise, if you're just meeting people, I don't understand. I don't understand the thinking. Why? Why? I don't get it. It's not like everyone's just gonna marry interracially, and then there's going to be no more black people. But apparently, like, I am seeing more and more of these stories that say black women need to carry on the race or something. Like, there's so much on the internet. It's just like, I can't even. I can't. That makes no sense. There's a whole continent of Africa. I don't think we're running out of black people anytime soon. Edward says, I'm not feeling it. You're not feeling it. What mix? Says Brian. Are you mixed? I don't know what you're saying. I just missed the comment. Sorry. Agree. Thanks for mentioning that point. You're welcome. And I have no idea what that point was now. This is pressing, and this info needed to be shared. Thank you. Yes, it needs to be shared because something has to be done about it. Now, what can be done about it? Again, we get literally all the articles were pointing at the fact of mentorship for black boys. And there is a portion, of course, which we talk about on this channel as well, of unconscious biases, discrimination that happens as well. So on the marriage thing, what I had pulled out from the article was that while there's a drop, I think I talked about that. If white women end up with white men, who in terms of their earnings are more than twice as likely to escape poverty as black men, their family income will be higher. Equally, if black women are more likely than white men to end up as single, they will also record a lower family income because they're not like marrying into getting, higher mobility, I think is what the point was there. What's happening to the families? Let me see. I think I talked about most of that. I'm just trying to make sure I pulled out all the points. So the black poverty points that I pulled out, black Americans born poor are much less likely to move up in the income ladder than those in other racial groups, especially whites. Almost half of black youth grew up in the bottom quintile. Share of youth ages 14 to 16 with parents in each income quintile. They kind of drew out a map of that if you're interested in checking that out later. Black men are less likely to get out of poverty compared to others, even black women. Black men born to low-income parents are much more likely to end up with a low individual income than black women, white men, black women, white women, and then especially white men, like everyone else. And then how to escape poverty as an adult. They are saying, the mentorship, we need to address racial bias in the country, of course, and other issues that plague our communities, and that will help. What else did I pull out here? I'm looking at my notes, so sorry I'm not showing. I don't know if I'm showing anything on the screen. Just wanted to make sure I hit everything. Oh, so as far as like the starting out poor, what was the reason and what were the long-term consequences of the growing up poor? So children growing up in low-income families are facing a lot of challenges that, more advanced families don't. They're more likely to experience the multifamily transitions. They're moving frequently and they're changing schools. So interrupting their school pattern and their education. The schools they're attending are less funded. And then the neighborhoods they're living in are more disadvantaged. So the savage scientist was kind of pointing out, like, yeah, the smart kids, like if you're growing up in these community, you have it even worse. So like they're picking on these children and like they're dealing with everything else in these environments. And then also that. So how do you even promote? Because I've grown up, like boys in general, I think they tend to do really well in like the math and scientists. And even just thinking about black boys in my family, very smart kids. So you take a smart kid and you put them in this terrible environment. What do you think is going to happen? And then we have the parents of these children have fewer resources to invest in them. As a consequence, their homes have fewer cognitively stimulating materials, and their parents are investing less in their education. The stress of living in poverty and struggling to meet daily needs are also impairing the parenting as well. And you guys know on this channel, I've talked about with the families in general in the US, I don't think our dynamic of just everyone's working and who's raising little Timmy and Cindy. I don't know, Timmy and Cindy sounded right to me. These kids, who's raising these kids, and like, there needs to be a better focus on the family. So one thing that I feel like has been a positive thing of this pandemic is that the parents are, even if they're working, they're at home and can kind of keep an eye out on these kids, because you guys know I've been talking about on the channel who's raising the kids. Like, why are we seeing these stories of these kids doing all these things? Like, what is happening with the kids? And I think it's part of it might be the family dynamic. Oh, what about mixed people? Is Brian, that's what you're saying. I don't know. The story didn't really look at that. Now, I did do another video where I looked at lighter skin tones and darker skin tones, and I did compare that people with lighter skin tones, both men and women, do tend to earn more than those with darker skin tones. And that's not just in the Black community. That's also looking at immigrants from different countries. Looking at Asians, for example, they tend to make more. We know with the Asian community, that was something that was brought up in the other video by the friendliest people in the world that just happened to join my chat. We're asking about the Asians. What about the Asians? What about the Asians? Asians, from what I've seen statistically, I mean, they tend to do pretty well when it comes to their economics. But I have to learn more about that. I don't typically study them as much because that's not my culture. But, I'm interested in learning about different cultures. So I'm a poor Italian puppy. Oh my gosh, you and those eyes. Well, I mean, come to America. Come to America. You may fare better. Come back over here. Who knows what may happen? Paolindo. I think you're joking, but I don't know. But if you are not joking, America, come on. Apparently white men, if you come over here in poverty, you might make it. I don't know. You may have better chances. But yeah, I think Italy has a lot of challenges too economically. When I was there, it was an interesting time. So I can only imagine Paolindo, like thinking about Italy economics. A family can only get out of poverty if every member is on the same page and has the same mindset. Definitely true. That's true across the board. Yeah. Like, and you guys know, I watched some Dave Ramsey. I don't agree with everything Dave Ramsey suggests. Like, for example, he suggests when you're getting out of debt, you should only start with a $1,000 emergency fund. And I'm like, that's nuts. Why in the world would I only have a $1,000 emergency fund? Like, what if like life comes crashing down? I only have $1,000. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But I get the thinking. So, he really works to help families get out of debt and set them up in a better place financially. And so, he talks about it a lot on his show, and he's like, if a husband calls in or a wife calls in and they're like, my partner isn't on board with the program, he literally tells them it's not going to work. Like, you have to get on the same page. So like, that would be me. You guys know I'm pretty minimalist. I indulge a little bit, like, like today I got a facial, like I don't know, I'll do different things. Like, I'll get a massage, I'll get a facial, I'll get my hair done. I'll do certain things, but then I also don't splurge on like Fendi and Gucci and all these silly things that does nothing for me. So, and then I like cook at home. I don't eat out every day like certain people. So there's like little things I don't spend money on, and I'd rather spend that portion to invest or save or do whatever. So can you imagine if I met someone that was like spending all the money every day, like money? Like, no, it would not work. It would be like a total. Now, I get if, one person is typically more of a spender and one is more of a saver, but they're aligned on the same page. One isn't like spending, both partners' paycheck before it even gets here, while the other is trying to like put the budget together. Like, it definitely doesn't work in that dynamic. So I 100% commendable, Kay, 100% agree with you. It just does not work. Everyone has to be on board. King of Kill says, I'm not opposed to dating outside of our people, but it's always queens first. Hey, I appreciate that. And well, here's the thing though, too. I think in general, people tend to date like people in their proximity and people that are similar, like they have common interests. So naturally, it would probably like, I don't think you should ever say like I only date this race of people because it's very limiting, and most likely if I'm a Black person, I'd probably be more likely to marry a Black man if they're in my proximity. But I will say, like, when I think about my friends and like who I've worked with and just like typically just who you're surrounded by, it hasn't been a lot of Black men. It has, like, generally, just thinking, because I don't think I've ever really thought about it. But like, if you think about your circle of friends, like, for example, I had a friend that was trying to hook me up with someone, and in the circle, it was a white guy because that she's white and that was the circle, and so she's trying to hook it up. She's trying to hook it up, right? So, just like if I had a bunch of Hispanic friends, like if my friend is like, "Hey, you should date such and such," they're probably going to be Hispanic, or and so it kind of goes down the line. But if you have a good circle of Black professional friends, then you're probably going to meet, I would meet a Black man. So who knows? My network is growing here in Dallas, so we'll see who I meet. We'll see what happens. But thank you. I appreciate that comment, King of Kill. I love it. I love it. Especially when it comes to marriage. And you know what? There's some thinking I've seen Black men say. There's definitely a group, I think, that follows Boyce Watkins that say, like, they need to marry Black women so that they can keep the wealth within the family. But then you read studies like this and it's like, well, what wealth? Like, where is the wealth going? Because Black people do have wealth. But when you look at a big percentage of those in poverty and like getting out of poverty, it's like the same dynamic. So we're going to continue to have these class issues. And here's the other thing that I think of too. Like, do we have enough people reaching back into our communities? I think that is a big problem because, every person in America, every Black person in America is not poor. Every kid in America is not raised in poverty, right? So where are the people helping the folks out of poverty? So I wonder, I'll have to do some more research into maybe thinking about Black women. I don't know, maybe are there more mentors? I will say for myself, I wouldn't say I really had a Black mentor. My first mentor was a white man, believe it or not. Like, my first mentor in high school, it was a white man, an older white man. It wasn't a sugar daddy. It was legit mentorship. It came with a scholarship program. But yeah, a white man. And he, like, it wasn't like we met all the time or anything, but he would find ways, like he would talk to me, figure out what I wanted to do, and like see who in his network could help me. So I don't know, maybe Black men need to, or maybe Black boys need to be paired with white men that are well networked. That could be something. I don't know. Especially if those in the Black community are not reaching out and saying, hey, this is how I can help you. So who knows? JMJ, okay, is this a good time to mention yet another layer that impacts this topic and several others you covered recently? Sadly, there's still a system in the US that wants all of us to remain as is. Yes, exactly. There's definitely that too. It's like, the reason why we don't learn about finances in school. Like, why would you teach finance in school? Things are going great for us at the top. We're good. You peasants down there, you just keep working for us. Thank you. Thanks. Right? You just keep doing your job, people. Just keep doing your job. That's all we need. We don't need any changes. We're good up here. Paulino saying, I would love to stay in a place with different cultures. You know that. Yes, you should be. Come on over to the US. Gucci, Armani, Versace, and Italian, but I don't spend money for that brand. Good for you. I'm against that world, and I hate wearing that shirt and tie. Yeah. You guys know I talked about this yesterday. I don't like the idea of branding myself and wearing all the brands plastered on. Like, why? You're not. Is Gucci paying me any money for doing this? Like, Gucci, are you going to pay me money to brand myself and advertise your products? No. So until that happens, there will be no brands as long as I can help it. Like, I literally will go to stores and I'll see something that's really cute, but it has some, brand names plastered against the top. And I'm like, oh, no, thanks. I'll pass. I'm Italian, but I don't spend money for the brands. I don't blame you. And you know what's interesting? That's another thing in the community. There's like, you look at the wealthier classes, and some of the first things that people do, at least I've seen this, when they kind of come up, is they have to get like a Cadillac or a whatever, kind of more premier car, while they're making maybe $50,000. And it's like, but can you afford the BMW? Like I get it, you can make the payment, but like, relatively looking to your budget, can you afford it? Like, is this a smart decision, So I think a lot of that have to be considered. Dallas is a great place to meet all types of people. It's better to be like-minded and marry up. Okay, commendable Kate. Yeah, yes, I would agree. I think if I'm going to marry, and I might talk about this too in another video. If I am going to marry, I don't think there is a benefit unless, and again, I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking about me, but also potentially, because if I'm in the proximity of a man every day, there is, things that may happen that may cause an infant. And so it's like, why would I not put myself in a place where myself and kids would be in a good standing? Like, it's a good family dynamic. And also, to commendable Kate's point earlier, if the finances aren't right, there's less chance of that relationship really working out long term. So why would you start out in that type of dynamic? Like, people will make a choice to move into, like, to date a certain person. And I'm like, yeah, they're cute, but like, you gonna pay for them? Like, what's going on here? JMJ is saying sugar daddy. No, not at all. Like, not at all. He was very good. Like, he definitely helped to kind of guide my thinking in the right way, because if you can, high school, college, like, you don't really know what you're trying to do. And then connecting me to the right people. Like, okay, you want to try this? Let's see how we can get you an internship and help you learn. How can we get you more money, right? And then I had another mentor who was a Black woman, and yet another mentor who's a white woman. Well, she's a friend. So, but yeah. And then I would say I technically, I guess, had another mentor who was a Black man for college. Like, in college programs, you get like a designated person. So there's definitely been multiple people in the dynamic that have helped. So yeah, but really that is the video. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on this, but what do we need to do? And thank you, Edward. Please do like the video if you have not already. If you want to share the information with someone, a Black man, Black woman, white man, whoever needs to know, feel free to share it with them. And so what can we help? What can we do to help? What can help the dilemma? So the things that we learned overall is that we need more people reaching out to the Black boys. We need the Black men, the fathers in the picture, because to my point, the article didn't say this, or the articles did not say that, the video didn't say this either, but we need to have the Black men in the picture, but also they need to start learning themselves about finances and how to better the family and teach that to the boys, because there's a difference for a mom teaching a boy something, just as there's a difference in a dad trying to teach a girl something. I like even remember my dad trying to have the talk with me. Like, it's a different conversation. It's awkward. You don't want to talk about this with your dad. It's like, what is happening? Get away from me. Like, I don't want to hear anything that you're saying. But when your mother is telling you, it comes from a different place. Like, you can open up and talk more, just like, because the same gender, we're in the same, we understand, we have the same type of situations going on, just like with boys and men. There are certain things that a woman, like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't even put this out there in the universe, but like, if I had a son, like, there are certain topics I'm not going to want to talk to them about. I'm not even going to know where to start. I'm going to have to reach out to someone and be like, how do I talk about this with my boy? Like, so we have to have them in the picture. And then the other thing is the financial literacy piece, which, again, great note earlier from Kim in the Bouquet about the financial literacy. Again, in this country, we don't have it, but particularly in the Black community, we cannot make any excuse. We have to have it. Like, we have to. It should not be a choice. And then we saw with the poverty dynamic, what tends to happen, the changes and shiftings in school, like the cycle, not putting money into education and things like that. So we have to start putting our dollars into education, taking them away from Gucci and Fendi and everything else, and putting it into the education and the kids. We have to focus on these kids. And if we don't have the Black boys set up, then, for the Black girls, it gets harder for when they're ready to get married. I do wonder if there will be a trend, because more information gets out, right? If there will be a trend of Black women saying, hey, I don't want to live poor. If I marry you, I might stay in poverty. Maybe I should try something else. Or, I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I don't know what the future will bring, but I definitely think it needs to be considered, because here's the other thing. If more, and one of the studies, they talk about this a little bit, that men tend to earn more, married men tend to earn more. I don't know if it's because they have more pressure, because they got to take care of the wife and the family, the kids, they have more pressure to, like, figure it out. They have to make this money. Maybe that will help, because if Black boys or Black men don't have to marry, they don't have to get married. Because yesterday, we had the person in here saying, we need to pay 50-50 child support. And it's like, how about you just not create children if you can't take care of them? Like, and then you won't have a child support issue, right? Don't complain about child support. Just don't have the kid if you're not ready. And so I was like, it was not the title of the chat, but I'm using it for reference, because it was just like, we're talking about white women and Black women pay disparity. What are you talking about? So you have these different scenarios, but if Black men don't feel like they need to marry, well, if they're not married, they're still going to make less. Looking at the data, because married men make more for whatever the reason. It's a lot. Anyway, did you enjoy the video? Did you get anything out of this discussion? Do you have final thoughts? Was there any aha moments for you? The aha moment for me was, Black women have a chance to get out of poverty unless they start a family, most likely with a Black man. Then it goes to which is crazy. It's crazy, right? It's really sad, but that was like the eye opener for me when I was looking at this. One was just like, the other one was that a Black boy starting out at the same level, like a wealthy family, having a downward mobility. That was the other aha moment. I was like, what? Like, how does that even happen? All you got to do is maintain. You just got to keep going. Like, you just got to keep going, but no, it goes down. So it's very interesting to me, but those are my aha moments of all of this. Let me see here. Oh, Miss Full Roller came in here. I think I'm missing some comments. Oh, yes, please do hit that like button as you come in. And if you leave out, please hit that like button. And again, share if someone needs to know this information. Well, there was a man nearby, yada, yada, yada. Then there was an infant. JMJ, you were so funny. Yeah, I don't know what happened, there's a man right there and a baby. I don't know. Just, it has happened. No, like, so JMJ's laughing at me because I was saying, like, if you're going to live in a space with a man, like, there's that likelihood of an infant coming to life, right? There is a creation process that may happen. King of Kill says, I'm educating my boys and every young man I know about money. Yeah, see, that's what we need. And the article is talking about mentorship. I think that's literally what they're talking about, that right there. Because if the dads are not there and doing it, or even if you do see a dad in the boy's life, like, there needs to be more community, I think, and it needs to be the men. The men in the community really have to take that initiative to mentor these young boys and teach them, just like King of Kill was saying just now. Hello, Miss Full Roller. Welcome in. Miss Full Roller, I needed you yesterday. JMJ is saying, amen, on the difference with teaching by each parent. Yes, exactly. And I don't think people understand that. I don't think people understand it. Because I've also heard women say, like, I can be the dad and the mom. And it's like, no, but you can't. There's a reason two people are creating these children. There's a reason why there's a family dynamic. You can, but be ready to have some issues with that. Be ready to have some struggles with that, And again, like we talked about, we're making less money. Black women in general tend to make less money. And, we do have to if we're going to have a child, we do have to go on leave because that is a medical condition that we're in, right? So you will have to take medical leave. Some people even get on bed rest beforehand. There's complications that happen. There's a lot that happens to a woman's body by having a kid. So that whole thought process that people have of like, yeah, I can do this all by myself. You go ahead, girl. You go ahead and do it, girl. You do it, girl. I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. No way, Jose. Unless, we do have instances where, like, someone passed away. Someone I used to work with actually had a situation. Her fiance passed away during the pandemic. So we have instances like that, right, that happen. And so now you have the single mom. So there are definitely instances that happen, but as much as we can, we should try to, avoid those if we can. G-Daddy Media, hello. Good stream, thought-provoking topic. Well, thank you. I appreciate that comment. Thank you very much. Both parties that made the baby need to be involved in teaching the children they created and providing for them. I agree. I think both need to be involved. But of course, again, it definitely has to come, from these men that it seems like there's that lack. Like, where are the men? What are the men doing? How is it that we still have this cycle of the boys not being able to get out of poverty or trending downward into poverty if they weren't born into it, right? Versus the women having, only about, 34% of Black women stay in poverty if they're born into it. And then 29% of white women stay in poverty if they're born into it. And then the stat for white men, 22% of white men are staying in poverty if they're born into it. Whereas for Black men, it was 54% are staying in poverty. So over half of Black boys stay in poverty. And then we looked at the Black women. Ms. Full Roller, I know because you came in later. And I'm sorry I missed your live. I saw it right when I was going live. You have the Black women where you raise a family, most likely with a Black man. And yeah, now your chances of getting out of poverty are, I think the number is 64%. Or the percentage that stay in poverty. Let me clarify. The percentage that stay in poverty are now 64% compared to before 34%. Let me bring up this article because I don't want to misquote. Am I looking at the right article? I don't know if I am because I have multiple up because I was like, you guys know, I'm like, what does this one say? And what does that one say? And what does this one say? 56%. Wait, is this right? Because it's so zoomed in. I thought it was 60. Okay, there it is. This is the stat. 62%. 62%. I don't know if I'm showing you guys or not. But this was the stat. So let me zoom this out just a little bit because it's like right in my face. Right in my face. So we look at these stats. So 54% Black men are staying in poverty if they are born into it. 22% white men, 34% Black women, and 29% white women. So women are kind of around the same, but the drastic is drastic with the men. 22% versus 54%, so over half. Only a percentage of the white men are staying in poverty. And then you look at once they have families. So what about, family income? What about that? What happens to them? Well, you see the men, Black men are still 50% of them staying in poverty. White men, 28% are still in poverty. With the women, it now jumped. So white women are about the same, 33% are still in poverty, like once they've gotten a family. Now it's 62% for the Black women. And then we looked at this, the summary. Oh, this is the part about the married men. Like if everything else is equal, married men tend to earn more income. What was the other part that I wanted to highlight? I'm trying to find it, guys. So I wanted to show that for Miss Full Roller, but we saw it, right? Oh, this part. So Black women do reasonably well on the first and very poorly on the second. The second is the family, like going into a family dynamic. They do well by themselves, like just getting out of poverty by themselves, but then family dynamic starts to get bad. This result is probably driven by the fact that Black women tend to create families with Black men who do poorly on both accounts. So again, it starts with the men, and then it brings down the family income results for Black women. So again, to the title of the video, it does start with the Black men. Starts with the Black men. Well, it generally starts with the men. Either way, like if you look at white women and you look at Black women, white men, like the men are bringing up the income in a lot of cases because we've talked about again, like women aren't making as much, first of all, right? So it's really tough to see. And we talked about this yesterday, the studies, 81% of Black women are the breadwinners because that means that, okay, so is a Black woman bringing up the Black family then? I don't know. It's interesting. And both families hold the couple accountable. Mm-hmm. Great, Edward. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Love that. Leotis says, I've learned a lot tonight. I appreciate you doing this. Thank you, Leotis. I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Edward, for sharing me out. Appreciate it. But even back in the day when folks were married, a lot of men were not that involved in raising their own kids. Good point. Touche. Good point. But I do wonder because I wonder the impact of just having a man present in the home, right? Because if men are just constantly working, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday too, I think today at least, men are at least sharing more in the responsibilities. Some men, because there's still some men that think, no, I'm working, I'm bringing home the bacon, I don't have to do anything. You take care of these kids, I don't want to. So, which is really bad. But I think the trend is more we're partnering, we're both, we're both at play here versus, to your point, Miss Four Roller, back in the day, yeah, the men weren't as involved in raising their kids, for sure. Brian's laughing. Brian is laughing up a storm. Oh, you can see it. Wait, let me see. Let me bring it back up. Let me see here. Let me see if I can zoom it out again. Let me see. Let me know if you can see it. It's kind of weird because I can't scroll over, but basically, so basically we were showing that Black men are having the low earnings mobility if they start out poor. So they're a poor community, right? So they're looking across Black men, Black women, white women. And so basically we were seeing these statistics. White women, 29% are staying in poverty. 34% of Black women are staying in poverty. So there's difficulty getting out of poverty in general. Like, it's hard to get out of poverty, right? But there's hope, it seems. Definitely for white men, 22% stay in poverty if they were raised in poverty. So there's hope. There's hope. But then you get over here to Black men, and it's like, where's the hope? Because over half, so 54%, are staying in poverty, right? I don't know if you can. I'll make it bigger for a second, just so I don't know if people can see. Let me take myself maybe out. Oh, I don't even have that option on here. Wait, is it showing the right screen? It's not. I don't know if it is. No, it's not. Sorry, Miss Four Roller. I'm not showing the right screen. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Let me know if you can see it. Okay, so this is what I was showing earlier. Okay, so let me zoom out just a little bit because it's really hard for me to work around it. Hopefully you can still see, but basically the Black men are having the low earnings. So all of these people raised into poverty, right? These folks have a chance. 29% of white women are staying in poverty. 34% of Black women are staying in poverty individually. And then 22% of white men are staying in poverty. So those are percentage of the people that are actually staying. Don't worry about this. This is from below. But these are the percentages of the folks that are actually, they're born into poverty, they're raised into poverty as a kid. What chance do they have getting out of poverty? What's the percentage of the people that actually can't make it out? They can't make it out because there's a lot of different things that keep us down, right? It's hard to get out of poverty. But, they have a chance. You see those numbers and you're like, okay. So they can get there. There's a bigger percentage of people that make it out of poverty that are white men, white women, and Black women. But then you look at Black men and you're like, ooh, okay, there's a chance, right? 54%, so over half of the Black boys are still in poverty, but there's a chance. But it's not as big of a chance as their counterpart, which, again, typically the comparison is white men and Black men. Just a lot of the studies over the years, that's kind of where the studies go. But then we look at families. Well, what about the family? What if they, get married or they have, kids, they cohabitate, whatever. They have family, right? Well, what happens? Well, these are the percentages of when, because typically in your close proximity. So if you have a dynamic where white women marrying white men, more of them are getting out of poverty, well, maybe that's going to bring up the family dynamic. So they're looking at these numbers. So what happens here? White women, 33%, now in a family, looking at just that white woman in the family, their earnings mobility, 33% are still in poverty. Women, the black women, now 62%. Now that not looking at them individually, but now like before marriage or before kids or before creating a family, looking at them after creating a family, 62%, or staying in poverty. So that actually increased above where the black men were. So they started a family, harder for you to get out of poverty. 62% are staying in poverty versus white women, 33% are staying in poverty. Then we look at white men, 28% are staying in poverty. And then we look at black men, hasn't changed much. But now instead of over half of the black men staying in poverty, we have just at the, we're at 50%. So what this study said, Brookings.edu, the black women were the only group showing a marked difference between the risk of being in the bottom quintile in the individual earnings distribution for each gender and the risk of being in the bottom quintile for the family income distribution. White people are doing well on both accounts. Black women do reasonably well at first. The first one, right, individually, but very poorly on the second. So individually, but with the family. This result is probably driven by the fact that black women tend to create families with black men who do poorly on both counts, thus bringing down the family income results for black women. Thus, it starts again with black men. So we have to figure out a way to get the black boys out of poverty when they get older. I'm back. I had to take a phone call. All right, Dunlap. Welcome back. Safe to say you're not marrying a brother anytime soon. I don't know. I mean, this is generality, right? The general population of black people, right? But who knows? I don't know what my market's going to look like here in Dallas. Who knows? Who knows what might happen? You talked out what you were sharing, so that's cool. Oh, okay, cool, Miss Full Roller. Cool. Perfect. Hey, Easy. Boys and girls are raised in 73% single mother homes. Yikes. Second, most women do not require men to marry them before childbearing. People have turned their back against God's command. Yeah, I think that's the issue. And I talked about that a little bit, Easy. I talked about if black men don't need to marry, if black women are not making that a criteria for them, then, what happens? I mean, you're looking at women across the board, actually. I'm thinking about Drake and his kid. He wasn't married, but he had a higher income. So it's a different story. But yeah, if we're not saying hey, you have to marry me before I procreate with you, then you're going to, what's the motivation? Because we're saying that men typically earn more when they're married because they do have, marriage, people kind of glamorize marriage and all of this and say, true love and blah, blah, blah. And it's when you look at history of marriage is more of we're going to draw this contract. We're going to go into this agreement to accomplish a goal. If looking at history, marriage, okay, we need to get you married with this person, this guy, this girl, to continue the legacy of this family. Or we need you to marry this guy from this other country so we can partner now, we can become allies, and we can have less war between, we can have peace. We need peace. So we're going to put you guys together, and that's going to be contractual agreement that we're not going to go to war with each other, right? Or income driven. Women had to get married. You're a woman, you don't know how to read. What are you going to do? You can't get a job. You got to marry someone, and they need to be at a certain income. They need to be able to take care of you. And as the family, the father, the mother, we have to make sure that they can take care of you. right? So, yeah, I mean, there's this, the Disney fairy tale princess, whatever, like, it's not real. Like, marriage is not like, okay, you get the handsome prince and then you guys live happily ever after, nothing ever happens and this is great. No, a lot of that stuff doesn't matter, but we teach our little girls this, this glamorization of marriage and what it should be. But there's other things that you should consider when it comes to marriage. For sure. Okay, you can see the graph. Yes. Success. Perfect. Because you guys know I don't want it to seem like I'm just pulling out stats out of nowhere, right? I want to show the information. Unfortunately, people are not marriage material. Dating is a game and people are out to get what they can from you. Then they're gone. It's hard to trust when people are using folks. I don't think that's generally true. I think there's a percentage of people, easy, that maybe may have different motives. Like, there are plenty of stories I've seen about Black men marrying a Black woman and then kind of getting up. Like, I don't know, Kanye West maybe could be an example, not necessarily marriage, or Kevin Hart. You see different samples, especially in entertainment, of these men that, date women and then they kind of got to where they need to be. And then they're like, all right, bye. Let's divorce. I'm going to get me an Instagram model. Goodbye. Good night. Adios. And then you see women. You see, there's women that say, like, I literally marry my husband because of the money, and that's it. Like, yeah. So there's a lot of things that go into play. But again, I go back to the fact that marriage is not solely about necessarily love. It's not just love. Like, what's that movie? What's love got to do with it? Yeah, it's not just based on that. There's other things to consider. And again, especially when you're thinking about children and creating this legacy and things like that, right? There's a lot that you have to consider. Marriage is not just, oh, you look good. We look good together. Let's get married. There's a lot that needs to be considered beyond that. Oh my goodness. I know I'm not marriage material. I'm proud of it. I've seen people on both sides of my family married and unmarried, and I don't see the difference. Relationships amongst Blacks seem to be adverse there. You know what? That's interesting. I've seen people say that. I've definitely seen a lot of people say, like, there's some type of competition between Black women and Black men, which, and I've talked about too, I think on DOD's channel, where I think the issue with Black men and women at the basic, like, not even considering wealth and this issue that Black men are not able to get out of poverty, and so if a Black woman marries them, they're kind of getting dragged down with them. I don't think we have trust amongst each other. I think this is a great comment, because I think the issue just comes down to, we don't really trust each other. And a lot of where that comes from, you have to go into the history of this country and slavery and all of that. But then also in other cultures, like I've heard from African women, from Nigeria, Cameroon, and different places, where they'll say, I am not marrying an African man because of X, Y, and Z. So it's, there's a lot of different things to consider when it comes to, Black American people, right? But then also, even in the African culture, there's some things, but it's not as great, right? There's a culture there. There's kind of the precedent of what marriage should look like. Economics are generally right before they have children. So it's different. But yes, I would say between Black men and women, there's deeper issues even beyond the economics. E. Dunlap says the older men are teaching younger men how to play. Exactly. That's an issue too. That is an issue. That definitely. Some men just want to play, and then there are women that want to play. There are some women that are like, I'm dating to see what I can get out of this. I don't, you know what? I think as long as men are playing and saying I'm dating a woman to get certain things out of them, I can't say anything wrong with a woman that's saying I'm dating to see what I can get out of this. It's like the same thing. It's just two different things, but hey. So I can't really speak on either one of them negatively necessarily. It's interesting. Ms. Four Roller says, I have observed in my years that the other women in the family frequently take up the slack for the men that have abandoned their children. Yes. This is another factor that attributes to women's poverty. Exactly. Yeah, just taking up. And we talked earlier too, the whole dynamic of the Black woman and the Black girls and family dynamics and even the culture. And so I'd love to get your thoughts, Ms. Four Roller, on that imagery where you see the Black girls, little girl in front of a Black man to protect them, right? Have you seen any of that imagery? It's really interesting. Easy says, I see single women with 3 or 4 kids living in Section 8 homes. The government provides these mothers a place to stay and food as long as the mothers do not get married. So the woman doesn't need a man. Well, so here's my thinking on that. Not knowing the background, I really don't dig into like women in Section 8 and things like that. I think it's good. I think there's good to have something in place for women that have kids and are not married, right? Because clearly the man has not given them a reason to not seek out help from the government. So that's one thing. So why hasn't the man married this woman before having the kids? That's one. Where's the man? Because I don't think most women are going to say, if they're in a stable environment and married to a man and now they're having kids, are going to say, you're taking care of me and this is a nice, cushy life, but I'm gonna, leave you and go on Section 8. Like, no, I don't think that happens. So where are the men that are saying, I'm gonna marry you before we have these kids, right? Or if we're having the kid, the Black community holds them accountable and says, like, look, you need to marry this woman. You're having these kids with this woman, you need to marry her, right? Next is, what's the alternative of that? The government doesn't support these families, then you're going to have even a harder issue. So I think it's good that there are spaces that women can go to get what they need to care for themselves and their children. The other part of that is, okay, so you're telling me if a woman has a viable option, and I've seen plenty of women get married with kids, so I've seen it happen. If a woman is marrying someone, I don't think that if it's a better option than where she's at, which is probably poverty if she's on Section 8, getting, her things provided by the government. If there is a man that is stable and offering her something better than that poverty, level, I can't imagine a woman wouldn't go ahead and marry them for the sake of her and her kids. So I think there's more, like, I get that easy, but I think there's more to that, right? Because again, if we're looking at these stats that say a lot of these Black men are not getting out of poverty, and even those that are starting out pretty well off, they have downward mobility back into poverty. Well, where are these men that would marry these women anyway? Where are the men saying, yes, let me marry you. Let me get you out of this situation. I don't know, right? And then in that case, why would you need that man? If, again, we see these statistics where you're still going to be in poverty. Like, you're most likely going to be in poverty. So why? Why? Make it make sense. Oh my goodness. E. Dunlap is saying, yes, married or not, you can still be a single parent. That's true. That is true. Very true. But generally, you're going to see better outcomes if you're married versus the alternative of a single mother. There's a lot of benefits that come with marriage. Like, for example, if you're married and let's say the husband were to pass away or they get an injury or get whatever, there's some income that's going to be coming to you to support you and those children, right? If, let's say, there's a house, it's going to be an easy process. You're going to get that house for those kids. So there are benefits to marriage, again, like more on the financial terms for the wife and the kids versus you're just being a single parent. What do you get if something happens to that man? I don't know. Luckily, I'm not dealing with that. So, oh man, knock on wood, I will not be dealing with that in the future either. True love, blah, blah, blah. Right. Yeah. I mean, like in my mind, I'm just like, this is thinking about love and marriage. And it's just like, yes, there should be love there, right? But I don't think it's just you only consider, yeah, they look good and we love each other and that's what we're going to do. It's not always what works. Government hasn't been cutting back from Clinton days. So if anything, there's some supplementation going on legally and illegally, is what E. Dunlap is saying. Ms. Fuller is saying marriage is hard even when you are compatible. Society does not want compatible couples, even though they say that. Right. We talked about a little earlier, like, yeah, you little people just keep doing what you're doing. We're good up here at the top. We don't need any changes. You guys just keep doing your thing. You need to work for us. So yeah, there's not like societal change is not going to come unless we actually implement it. Yeah. Good night, friend. Really good stream again tonight. Oh, thank you for coming by, JMJ. Appreciate you. E Dunlap. And I should get off of here. I've been on here over 2 hours, guys. Oh my gosh. So I need to go through these comments and end the stream. Yep, exactly. I've observed this of many of the marriages from back in the day that are held up on a pedestal. Interesting. Camille Bouquet is saying, hey, a lot of people aren't marriage minded, so we rarely get married or rarely stick it out. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a short-term mentality in our culture in general in the US. Like, we're very individualistic. So I think it can be really difficult to live with another person, even thinking about that or thinking of others, right? So very individualistic society. And then you tie on this short-term microwave age. Like, we want things quick. We get something, we're done with that. And then we kind of bring that same thinking to marriage and in a lot of other areas too, like this kind of flip it culture, get it and flip it and on to the next, right? But we have to think long-term. Even with work and economics and finances, you see people just, I want to invest in Bitcoin real quick. And did I make any money? And it's tomorrow. Like, or I want to invest in stocks and I'm just going to, no, they're building wealth. It takes a while. It definitely takes a while to actually build wealth. Like, you can make money quickly, but to build wealth, it does take some time. But in the culture today, it's like, I want it now. I want it yesterday, actually. But that's not how, especially marriage, is going to work, right? Hi, Uno. Welcome in. Nice to see you here. Yes, thank you, JMJ. I think JMJ is probably long gone because I'm late with the comments. Please be sure. Yes, thank you. Yes, hit that like button, please. I appreciate it. I surely appreciate it. Miss Fullworld's comment. Okay, thanks for mentioning that, Jessica. Women are guilty too. Oh yeah, you guys know on this channel, I try to keep it, I'm going to be biased a little bit because I'm a woman, right? But I try not to be. I try to be fair. I try to look at both sides because yes, there's things that go on both sides. There's people are using people in different ways. There are women that are like, I want to come up, I'm going to marry this guy and I'm going to have a better life. And that's it. I don't care about him. I plan on divorcing him as soon as I can, right? There are some women, I don't think a large percentage of women, but there is a percentage of women that have the mentality, just like there are the men that think, I just want this woman for one night. So, yeah. Or I just want this woman because she's beautiful now. She's going to be my trophy for now. As soon as she starts getting old, I'll get a new one. Think Donald Trump. How many wives did he have? Trophies. Get a new one. You're retired. We're on to the next. Child, Miss Laurel are saying, if I start talking about that, you'll be here a while. LOL. To keep it short, I can't stand that crap. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Right. King of Kill says, I believe it is a sign of an evolved society when people can marry for love above all else. That's an interesting perspective. So, like marrying for love, like I see you're poor, I'm going to marry you anyway. I don't know. And again, for women, I think there's a double standard, right? I don't think there's any negative talk. Well, maybe there is because I know men get called simps. I learned, in another video, like someone was calling someone a simp, and I'm like, what? Anyway, but a man marrying a woman of a lower class or of a lower like financial or socioeconomic status isn't seen as bad, I think, generally, as long as she looks good, right? Even women judge by that. Like women, I've even heard in my family, like, she's not for you. She doesn't look for a man though, right? And then for women, it's more about, okay, what does the ring look like? What does the guy do? Right? It's not about what he looks like. That's not generally the question that's asked. Now, in again, with my friends, my spaces, mixed spaces. So not just Black women. It's not just, so it's not about like, what does he look like? What does he do? I've actually noticed this. Like if I talk to one of my Black women friends, it's more like, okay, so what does he look like? And what, is he cute? Now casual encounters, these are not like in my circle, but like if I'm casually telling someone like, oh yeah, I've dated, I'm dating this guy or whatever. I just met this guy. And they're like, what did he look like? And then they ask, what does he do? Generally with thinking about my other circle of friends, the first question is normally either like, what do they do? Or how did you guys meet? Like, how did you guys meet? And then it's normally, what do they do? What do they do for work? Or vice versa, like swapped. And then it's like, okay, so do you like them? And, then it gets into what do they look like? Right? Or are they tall? Like what's going on? So there is a difference there. It's interesting. So maybe I think there's a lot to be considered about the person. Agreed. Do you think you'll see that in your lifetime? Right? Love above all? Because I think a lot of people today just it's very conditional love. I think, the true love is it's not even, I am even afraid that we're not seeing as much of this unconditional love with a mother and child. Like I see too many stories of throwing a baby in a trash can and stuff. I'm like, what happened to this unconditional love that, happens between a mother and a child? So it's, let me take a sip of water for that one. Sad. It's really sad. I don't know. Unconditional love. I will say that women generally think that is truer. I think that's a possibility. Like we tend to think that men are going to love us the same as we love, right? And it's just not the case. No, it's not that men are incapable of love. I think they love differently. And I do feel like, love between men and women is conditional. It is conditional. That is my personal opinion. I'm not hopeful, but I think I can help move the needle a bit in the right direction. Okay, look at King of Kill. King of Kill just seems like the sweetest. So that's awesome. Marriage is an economic agreement. Always has been. If he's broke, he's, oh my goodness. Okay, E. Dunlap is saying marriage is an economic agreement, always has been. If he's broke, he has no right to be married. You know, it used to be like that. Like, you can't have my daughter if you can't take care of her. Like, that's pretty basic. Like, Steve Harvey is one that says that a lot, about like, okay, you're trying to get my daughter, but what do you do? Can you take care of my daughter? Is she going to be safe with you? Right? Or even like going out on dates. Like, my first date, my date was super afraid of doing anything. And it wasn't even because of my dad. My dad didn't know about my first date until after. No, meaning getting to talk. But they were scared silly. They were scared out of their, like, they didn't even want to, didn't even approach me for a kiss or hug. Like, they're like, I don't want to go to, they were thinking, I don't want to go to jail. Like, am I going to go to jail if I do something wrong? Like, it was that. So I might get into that in another video, but yeah, and it was later. It was like, I think I was was I a senior in high school? Like, I was a late bloomer. So yeah, I think I was either a junior or senior in high school. So yeah, anyway, little caveat. We, yeah, definitely always need to strive towards it. Easy is saying women do not require men to marry them, but at what point do women stop having children outside of marriage? So here's the thing. Like, yes, I think both need to consider that. I think the burden has always been on the woman to, make sure that they're married. And if it's not married, like across cultures, all across the world, like if you're not married, then it's like this shaming that happens. But what about the men? And Easy, I know that you mentioned Christianity in the chat, and I have a lot of feelings about my Black Christians and my Christians in general. Because what about the men? Because the Bible doesn't say, only the women need to wait until marriage. Only the women. Just you women. It just says you shouldn't. Like, people, you should not. So what about the men? I think both have to be held accountable. And I think in the community, instead of shaming the women, we need to look at the men. Like, whatever happened to if a guy gets a girl pregnant, the family is like, well, you need to marry that girl. What happened to that? That could potentially raise some issues, but I think if there was that, like, I don't know, standard of like, if you have a child with this woman before marriage, you're going to have to marry them, or you're going to be shamed by the community, or you're going to have some type of repercussion versus just the woman getting shamed. I think we would see a difference in the community. But Black people don't shame the men for much of anything. I don't see it personally. I'm not seeing it enough. Because if there were, I think there needs to be more pressure put on the men to get them to higher income levels and things like that. Because we're not seeing it. Again, this is my personal opinion. So if you think differently, just let me know. Commendable K, there are tax breaks and safety nets for survivors with marriage. But if one person is bad for business or a burden on the other, then the marriage business may suffer or will fail. You know what's interesting? I have seen a lot of information going around. I have to look into it more that say generally, even when a woman is like a stay-at-home mom, income levels tend to rise because that woman manages the money really well or finds ways to increase the income, like investing and things like that, or starting a at-home business as well. So there's a lot, like, my stance on, like, when there's kids, I don't think you should just say, nope, you got to go to work. I think there's other alternatives you should look at within the family dynamic. But yeah, there's definitely tax breaks as well that happen with marriage. There's a lot of protections put in place. So eventually at the end of the day, the woman and the kids are set up in a really good place if something were to happen to the man. And, as a man, like if you're in a health situation, like generally if you're married, your wife is going to care for you versus, you're just out here like, again, love is conditional. So is a woman going to be there if you're knocked out and your legs broke? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Depends on the person, right? Commendable case that marriage is a business. I agree with that. Generally, yeah. Individualism is a good thing. Just have to align with those who support our self-interest, and we can support theirs in a reciprocal relationship. No more collectivism and tribalism. I don't think there's an extreme. I think there has to be a little bit of all of that. I think there has to be some individualism. I think there has to be some collectivism. I think because when you again look at our community, the Black community, and I know everyone in here isn't of the Black community. But if you think of the Black community, we're not really doing anything collectively. We are all doing our own thing. Generally, again, generalities here. I think we need a little bit of looking out for each other. Like I saw that story of the girl that was shot by the officer, and it's like, what are these parents doing? Like, why did it even get to this level? What were the people doing? Why are we not watching out for each other? Why are parents not looking out for their kids? Why are other grown people not looking out for? So I have a different thinking on that. Dunlap said when men control the, oh, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Leave that right there. Oh yeah, I think if men had to use birth control, because there's birth control for men. If it's just a whole double standard. We'll have to talk about that in another video. There's a whole double standard when it comes to men and women and like our bodies and things like that. Like there's a pill for men that they can take, but there's no pill for women. Like it's okay for men to take certain things when it comes to their, bodies. But women, oh no, you guys can't do that. Well, then they can't do that. Like what? Either we're going to not control other people's bodies at all, or we are, right? So it's like, that's a whole nother issue. I will talk about it. I've got a long list of things I got to talk about on this channel. It takes both men and women to create a child. So both men and women have to decide that they're not going to bring children outside of the marriage. Exactly, Ms. Fuller, exactly. We focus way too much on surface stuff in terms of relationship. Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. I was talking about earlier about like, dating. Like why, I don't know. I personally, I was like, why do you have to consider race so much as heavily in dating? Like it's just meeting other people. Like when I go to make a friend, I'm not going through my list of like, wait a minute. I think I got enough Hispanic friends. Moving on. No, you just organically connect with people, and it's a beautiful thing. So I think with dating and even marriage, like it's just meet with people and see if you connect with them, see if your values line up, and go from there. It's just interesting. God with us together. Hello from North Carolina. If a man has no plan, he is on the road of chaos. Words to live by. Thank you for coming in here. That is so true. That's the kind of societal relationship conditioning illusions I was talking about. Yes, please do hit the like button. If you are enjoying the conversation, hit the like button, please. Share with a friend if you think they will enjoy the conversation or if they need to know this information. And definitely make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Your first date was like, I'm trying to get back home in one piece. They told me that after, because we're actually casually friends now. They'll send me it on Facebook occasionally. which I'm never on. So it's like I literally responded to a note that was, I'm terrible. Like some of the places like Twitter or Facebook, I'm like, I'm late responding. But I Instagram, LinkedIn, you guys know I'm better there. But yes, he told me like he was worried because some of the things that happened beforehand, the conversation that happened before we went out on our date, and he was like, what in the heck? But I don't know, sometimes maybe that's what you have to do before the first date. Unfortunately, marriage and church is not a priority today, and the children suffers from dysfunctional homes. Right, we talked about that earlier. Both single black women and single black women are living in poverty versus building together. Single black women tend to do a little better, which we talked about. We talked about that a little bit. If a black woman is in poverty, she has a better chance of getting out of poverty. But when she has kids, has a family, then that's when things turn really bad for her. It goes south real quick. Imagine asking a man if he's on the birth control. Yeah, right. He'll buy horn goat pills from the gas station or for taking birth control. Exactly. In my perspective too, I think the same. But who knows? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a guy, so I will try not to speak for them, but I doubt it. Miss Four Roller's laughing. Okay. With that, I am going to close things out I'm going to replay the video, and then I'm going to close things out because I know people came in here later. But that is the video content. I'm going to play this just so everybody's on the same page. I enjoyed everyone tonight. It was a great conversation. It went in a lot of different directions, but we pretty much stayed on topic, which I love. So let's replay the video so we can get, again, what is the point of the video? This is the point. And let me know if you can hear the audio. I saw the comment, no audio. Okay, let me try this again. Let me try it again. I don't think the thing popped up this time to say audio. So let me see. Let me see. Oh, let me get rid of it. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, that's what I did wrong. I didn't do share audio. Let's try this again.
New research finds class matters a lot less in America when it comes to economic mobility for black males. Income inequality is often cited as an important factor in holding people back. But a new analysis suggests black boys and black men face economic disadvantages even if they start off from a similar point of income and wealth as their white counterparts. Yamiche Alcindor is back with our conversation.
A new study released this week underscores just how big a gap African American males face when it comes to moving up the economic ladder. Some of the findings are dramatic. White boys who grow up in rich households are likely to remain that way. Black boys who are also raised at the top are more likely to become poor instead of staying wealthy in their own adult households. Black boys fare worse than white boys in 99% of America, even when children grow up next to each other with parents who earn similar incomes. Raj Chetty of Stanford University is one of the co-authors of this study. He joins me now. Thank you so much, Raj, for being here. This report seems to indicate that Black men will fare worse than white men, even if they are raised in households with similar incomes. Can you explain what's happening there?
Yeah, so one of the most striking findings of the study to us was that even if you take Black and white boys raised in families at exactly the same income level, even at high income levels, you see that Black boys end up with very different outcomes on average relative to white men. They're less likely to complete high school, they're less likely to go to college, they have significantly lower earnings in adulthood. And that phenomenon, interestingly, applies really only to Black men. When we look at Black versus white women, you see much more similarity in their outcomes if they grow up in families of similar incomes. So it's something unique to what's happening to Black men in America that I think is really a concern for generations going forward in terms of perpetuating inequality by race.
And that inequality is really striking to me. One of the things that this study reports is that African American men who will grow up in households with two parents that are earning $140,000, they fare about the same as a white young man who is raised by a single mother making just $60,000. How can that be true? Because it feels so counterintuitive. And what does that mean for African American families and their futures?
Yeah, what you're getting at really is the finding that there's a great deal of downward mobility in Black families. So you would have thought intuitively, that's what we expected going in, is when you get to a certain income level, maybe racial disparities disappear, that at some point you kind of escape the poverty trap. But that really doesn't seem to be the case. Even once your parents reach a high income level, it continues to be the case that Black men have higher odds of essentially ending up in the bottom of the income distribution than staying at the top of the income distribution. And that's why you get this pattern that Black men's outcomes look comparable to white men growing up in relatively low or middle income families.
You mentioned in the study that there are unique obstacles that Black men face. Just to be clear, are we talking about racism and racial bias, or what are those unique obstacles that Black men in particular face?
Yeah, so to try to get at that, we look at how this varies across different parts of the country. So look neighborhood by neighborhood and ask, are there some neighborhoods in America where you see small Black-white gaps, or perhaps Black men doing better than white men? And surprisingly, you find essentially no such areas. In 99% of neighborhoods in America, you see better outcomes for white men than Black men. Now, digging in deeper, you can ask, where do we see relatively good outcomes for Black men? And there are a couple of factors that pop out from that analysis. One, you see that areas with larger rates of father presence in homes among Black men, you have better outcomes for Black boys there. So if there are more two-parent families, particularly among African American households, you see better outcomes for Black boys. And second, you see that areas with lower levels of racial bias among whites tend to have better outcomes for Black men. So those are a couple of the factors that I think could be associated with these better outcomes, but I think more remains to be understood in terms of exactly what's driving these really sharp differences.
Gotcha. And I want to talk about the differences between Black women and Black men. There are some critiques out there, critics of the study out there, that are arguing that Black women who don't have long-term incomes weren't counted in your study. Is that accurate? And could you talk a little bit about your findings of Black women and the data that you used?
Yeah, so we include everyone. So the power of the study is that we're able to track, using anonymized data, about 20 million Americans from birth to adulthood, people born in the early 1980s whose incomes we're looking at in their late 30s. And that includes everyone, whether you're working or not. Every single person is counted. And so if you're not working, you're assigned an income of 0 and you're counted in the study. And what we show is that even taking that into account, Black women, conditional on growing up in a family that's at the same income level as white women, they end up with very similar outcomes. They have similar levels of earnings, similar wage rates, similar college attendance rates, they work at similar rates. So it's really remarkable how for women, you don't see that much of a Black-white disparity, very starkly different from men. Now, I should emphasize that doesn't mean that women are living in households with the same income levels, because Black women tend to be married to men who are Black, who have lower incomes, and they also are married at lower rates. And so if you look at household income, of course, you do see a significant disparity between Black women and white women. But when you look at their own earnings, they look very similar.
And then I guess I have one quick question, which is, tell me a little bit about the solutions here. You mentioned in the study that mentoring might be a possibility, that there might be some policy changes. What do you have to say about how this could change?
Yeah, so in thinking about the solutions, I think it's very important to remember that you continue to see these disparities even among kids growing up on the same street, going to the same schools, and so on. And so often solutions people think of are things like we need to create greater opportunities for Black and white kids to grow up in the same neighborhoods, to attend the same schools, and so forth, to reduce residential or physical segregation in America. And while I think that can be extremely valuable, what this study shows is you need to do more than that. Even among kids growing up in the same area, you need to create the same opportunities for Black men to thrive as you see for white men. That could involve things like mentoring programs, for example, like the My Brother's Keeper program, targeted at low-income men to give them pathways to success. It could involve efforts to try to reduce racial bias. It could involve efforts to try to create more racial integration within schools and within neighborhoods so Black and white kids have similar opportunities.
Thank you so much, Raj, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we heard it a couple of times here. We talked about it. That is the video. We'll have to have continued conversations about Black community economics and, in particular, Black men, Black women, where we all fit in. And then also we'll continue talking about women and different dynamics of different cultures in this society. We also brought up Native Americans. Where do they fit into the picture? They are also a big group that are suffering economically. So that will be coming up again. And then also I had mentioned before, I wanted to look into our newest generation, right? And how they have been suffering during the pandemic. That was the last group that I needed to assess. And so that will be also coming up shortly. And tomorrow I will be having basically an open session for job seekers. So I'll have basically office hours for anyone to just come in and ask general questions about job related topics or other topics that are just on their heart. If you just want to come in and chit chat with me for a bit tomorrow. So that'll show up on my live session if you want to, or on my live, probably around, I think it's an evening session as well. So I will check it out and share it in my community tab. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you guys so much. And again, of course, if you have not liked the video, please do give me a like, share with anyone that's interested or that you think would be interested in getting this information. And of course, make sure you are subscribed to my channel so you can get updates on the topics. And with that, lovely people, I will see you in my next video. Bye and have a lovely night.